What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the new Awesemo Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And today we are going to continue talking some Dynasty. We'll be hitting the running back position, going through the top 12 Dynasty running backs ahead of the 2021 NFL season. Of course, before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live at Awesemo. But let's get into it talking Dynasty running backs, and we are going to descend down the list going 12 to 1, talking the top assets in Dynasty at the running back position. And today we are going to start with none other than Pittsburgh Steelers' first-round draft pick, Najee Harris. He is a bigger back, 6'1", 232, but extremely productive coming out of Alabama. And Najee Harris this past year, he really showed a lot as a pass catcher. He caught 43 balls for 425 yards, 4 scores. That was in addition to the 251 carries where he racked up 1,466 yards and 26 scores. That all amounted to 22.6 opportunities per game. The issues with Najee Harris from a dynasty perspective, he, again, is a little bit advanced in his age, but he also enters an interesting situation in Pittsburgh, a team very much rebuilding. Last year, they were the second pass-heaviest team in the NFL, and now they have Matt Canada coming in as their new OC, and they very much have tried to embrace a run-first approach. However, they've done so in a roundabout way, drafting Najee himself in the first round rather than address their offensive line. A unit that now loses Matt Filer, Alejandro Villanueva, David DeCastro, and Marquise Pouncey. They were ranked 29th, according to Pro Football Focus. We'll see how this offensive line does, but that could hurt Najee's efficiency immediately. From there, they have other questions long-term, like what happens with Ben Roethlisberger and the entire offense. Just a lot has to go Najee's way outside of the pure opportunity in order for him to be a productive dynasty asset. While he will see the opportunity, he may struggle with some efficiency, and that's the reason he's a little lower on this list than some other rookie prospects. Overall, the 2021 rookie running back class was a little bit weaker, but Najee Harris still checks in as dynasty running back number 12. Number 11, we move to Tennessee. We have the king himself, Derrick Henry. That nickname comes from his 2,000-yard rushing campaign we just saw from Henry. He's a little bit lower on this list because of age. He is 27.4 years old right now. He's entering his 6th season in the NFL. But positively, Derrick Henry doesn't have as much tread on his tires as some other backs. He started out in a timeshare and has slowly worked his way into the voluminous role we've seen from the last couple of years. We just mentioned it. He carried the ball 378 times for 2,027 yards and 17 scores on the ground. Not much of a pass catcher, caught 19 balls for another 114 yards, but still he is enormous as far as volume goes. 25.6 carries plus targets per game, most of that coming on the ground. But Henry's now accounted for 81.5% of the running back carries, 58.5% of the running back targets. Tennessee doesn't throw the ball to running backs that much, just 53 total times last year. But he also was second in the NFL in red zone attempts, 59 attempts there. Tennessee has shown no signs of slowing down this offseason. They move from offensive coordinator Arthur Smith and replace him with in-house offensive mind Todd Downing. They lose Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, but they add in Julio Jones, and they have Ryan Tannehill secured for the near future. So there's a lot to like about this offense, and we shouldn't see too many changes year over year. Their offensive line is also fairly secure with Taylor Lewan, Roger Saffold, among others. They drafted Dylan Radins in the second round this year. The Titans were already 4th in points per game last year, and they have a win total of 9 this year, so projected to be above average again. There's little to suggest that Derrick Henry is going to be ceding additional work. He will cede some pass game work likely to Darrington Evans, but this Titans team is so run-heavy anyway. They were 30th in pass rate overall, that Derrick Henry's opportunities still should remain around that 25 opportunities per game mark. Due to age, he's a little bit lower down the list, but Derrick Henry still checks in as the dynasty running back 11. Moving to number 10. We go to second-year pro DeAndre Swift, just 22.4 years old. He's a bit smaller. He's 5'8", but still compact frame, 212 pounds. He was last year's draft pick on day 2, coming out of Georgia. Started 4 games, but played in 13. In that span, he amounted 521 rushing yards, 357 receiving yards, and that was the role that he mainly functioned in efficiently. 57 targets, he turned that into 46 receptions, scored an additional 2 scores there. But when we look at his opportunity overall, he averaged just 13.2 per game, again, carries plus targets, just 19 red zone attempts. That was because he was battling Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson for carries as well as targets. Now both of those players are out of Detroit. They do add Jamal Williams, who they plan on using. They have a new coaching staff in Dan Campbell and Anthony Lynn. Lynn has been very vocal about this being a two-back committee between Swift and Jamal Williams. But there's a lot to like about Swift long-term for Dynasty, not only his age, but his strong pass-catching profile. Detroit's rebuilding right now. They lose Matthew Stafford in addition to the backs, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, a few players on the offensive line. But they add Jared Goff, they add Rashad Perriman, and they likely will be up near the top of the draft order next year so they can add some more talent. The one strength of this team currently is the offensive line, which bodes well for Swift as well. They have Taylor Decker at left tackle. They draft Penei Sewell with their first-round pick this year. So while maybe this upcoming season, DeAndre Swift doesn't project for an elite workload or efficiency, but down the line, we're rebuilding Detroit. They should use Swift. Again, just 22.4 years old. A lot to like moving forward for Swift. Number 9. The Washington football team and Antonio Gibson. There's a lot of similarities between Gibson and Swift. Gibson's in his second year. He's 23 years old, so just slightly older than Swift. However, he's a much bigger back. He is 6'2", 220 pounds. Actually played a lot of slot receiver at Memphis before converting full-time to the running back position with Washington last year. And he started 10 games for this team, played in 14, showed a lot as a rusher, one of the most explosive athletes at the position, finished with 795 yards, 247 receiving yards. That was while splitting work with Peyton Barber and J.D. McKissic. He averaged 15.3 opportunities per game, and we saw that slowly trend his way throughout the season. There is a reasonable expectation that he could approach 18 to 20 touches per game, just ceding some pass work to J.D. McKissic. But it's not even out of the realm of possibility that Antonio Gibson takes over a full bell cow workload, giving his receiving prowess that we saw in college at Memphis. Also had 29 red zone attempts. Because of his big stature, that's something we can expect for an improving Washington team. They're already projected for 8.5 wins. That's better than last year. And their strength of schedule, while 28th, is going to be heavily reliant on their defense to get it done. Bodes well for the running game there too. They still have Scott Turner as the OC. This team passed the 7th most last year. They ran the 9th most plays per game. That bodes well for his opportunity overall. And more importantly, they move from Alex Smith and a series of other quarterbacks that started games, Dwayne Haskins among them, to Ryan Fitzpatrick, which should really bode well for this offense overall. Also, strong offensive line play between Cornelius Lucas and Sam Cosmi, whoever ends up starting at the tackles. Brandon Scherf's on the franchise tag, Wes Schweitzer, Chase Rourier. This Washington team is ascending. As far as concerns for Gibson, again, still very new to the position, but his 23 years of age should help his development curve. On an ascending Washington team, he checks in as the running back 9 in Dynasty. Running back 8. We have a buy low situation with Kansas City Chiefs running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, still just 22 years old in his second season. Again, he's now younger than DeAndre Swift. He is now younger than Antonio Gibson. He's younger than Najee Harris, but many people have written him off despite recording over 1,000 all-purpose yards last year. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is another one of these small backs. He's 5'7", 207 pounds. Started 13 games for the Chiefs, rushed for 803 yards, and caught 36 balls for 297. He slowly emerged throughout the season as a workhorse back for Kansas City before ending up injured. This team did throw to the running back position 92 times. Clyde Edwards-Helaire accounted for 60% of those targets. Also had 28 red zone attempts, making his 4 rushing touchdowns due for some positive regression here. Again, he's going to be playing in one of the most efficient offenses in football. A lot of scoring opportunities here. The Chiefs last year were just 6th in points per game. They were 8th in plays per game. They had the 5th highest pass rate. They're projected for 12.5 wins here, which means a lot of scoring opportunities. And he'll be playing with Patrick Mahomes at least through the end of his rookie contract. We'll see what happens with Edwards-Helaire after that, but that's a number of productive seasons here. As far as what this Chiefs offense looks like moving forward, they still have Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator. They do lose Sammy Watkins, and they lost a lot on the offensive line, including Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz, Stefan Wisniewski. but they did a great job replacing those bodies. Orlando Brown comes in at left tackle. They have Joe Thuney, Austin Blythe. They returned Laurent Duvernay-Tardif on the interior after he opted out. Mike Remmers is returning at right tackle. They also draft Creed Humphrey in the second round to play on the interior at some point. This Chiefs offense doesn't look like it's slowing down at any point in time, and there's honestly an argument for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be much higher on this list. Because he's 22 years old, I wouldn't have any problem with him outside the top 5, but he checks in at RB8 for me. We'll go with Kansas City Chiefs Clyde Edwards-Helaire here. Moving to RB7, Joe Mixon. In his 5th season, but still just 24.9 years old, he will be 25 when the season starts. He was one of the youngest prospects coming out of his draft class. He is 6'1", 220 pounds, started 6 games last year before missing the latter half of the season with an injury. Looking at his stats here, we'll primarily refer to the 2019 season, where he did account for 1,137 yards on 278 carries. He caught 35 balls that year for an additional 287 yards. Last year, those numbers started to shift a little bit in those first 6 games. While Cincinnati was incredibly inefficient, they began to phase out Giovanni Bernard, which is something we hadn't seen them do. Again, they signed Mixon to that massive contract in the offseason, but then he ended up going down with injury. Now Giovanni Bernard is completely out of the picture in Cincinnati. He moves over to Tampa Bay in free agency, leaving just Samaje Perine and 6th-round rookie Chris Evans to compete with Mixon. This Cincinnati offense, while they lacked a little bit in efficiency, they were 29th in points per game. They still pass at the 13th highest rate. They finished 13th in plays per game, both of which were a little bit higher when Joe Burrow was healthy. Joe Burrow went down week 11 with an ACL tear. Now they enter their 3rd season with Zach Taylor as head coach. They have Joe Burrow coming back from the injury. They add explosive element Jamar Chase to the offense. Their offensive line continues to improve as well. They draft Jackson Carman in the 2nd round. He should slide in and play one of the guard spots. They have Jonah Williams, former 1st-rounder, at left tackle. And, of course, this team has Mixon locked up long-term, which is something we like from a player who, again, is just 24.9 years old. On an ascending offense with less competition than recent seasons and a strong pass-catching role as well as goal line role, there's a lot to like about Mixon heading into this year, which is why he still checks in at RB7. Despite injuries and some limited production in a Cincinnati offense, which has been inefficient to this point. Again, expecting those to improve. Going to the top 6, we have Cam Akers for the LA Rams, entering his 2nd season, 22 years old. Again, one of the younger prospects that we have. He started 5 games last year, played in 13, did deal with some injury down the stretch, but he is 5'10", 217 pounds, can very much handle a full workload. Very adept pass catcher in college, and we saw that work his way into his game late in the season where he had 11 receptions for 123 yards, also carried 145 times for 625 yards. And again, this was a little bit of a growing process for Akers. He played just 32% of the snaps throughout the year. He handled 45% of the running back carries and 19% of the targets, but we saw this grow throughout the season. Akers, over the course of the year, averaged 12.2 opportunities per game. But in the last 6 games of the year, they phased out Darrell Henderson. They phased out Malcolm Brown, who's no longer with the team. And Akers handled 24.3 opportunities per game in their final 6 games, including the playoffs. Also had an enormous red zone role, considering he only played 30% of the snaps all year. Still saw 31 red zone carries. That was 17th in the NFL. This Rams team, already highly efficient. They've morphed their offense depending on personnel. We've seen them extremely pass heavy at times. Last year, they were 26th in pass rate, but they do run a lot of plays overall where they were 5th in plays per game, which has been a staple of Sean McVay's offense throughout his career. We've seen efficient seasons out of runners like Todd Gurley in the past, and now we get the injection of Matthew Stafford into the offense, which is a major upgrade over Jared Goff. Not to mention that, but they return all starters on the offensive line. They will have to replace 39-year-old Andrew Whitworth at some point, but overall, there's a lot locked in place for Cam Akers, a former day 2 pick. Throughout the duration of his rookie contract, he should be very valuable in Dynasty. And then he will only be 25 years old when that contract expires. So potential for a second contract, making him one of the most valuable running backs in Dynasty right now. Running back number 5. While there is a case for Akers to be a little higher on this list, we go with a proven commodity in Alvin Kamara at number 5. He's in his 5th season, still just 25.9 years old, so 26 years old when the season starts. 5'10", 215 pounds, plays in an offense undergoing some changes, but Kamara has shown to be one of the most dynamic runners in the NFL when healthy. Last year, he rushes for 932 yards. That was on just 187 carries. He will split some time with Latavius Murray, but we draft Alvin Kamara because of his receiving upside. He's had over 100 targets in each of his seasons, healthy seasons. He finished last year with 756 yards and an additional 5 scores. He finished with 21 total touchdowns last year in this offense. Played 65% of the snaps, handled 54% of the carries, and 75% of the running back targets. That was in an offense that threw the ball 143 times to the running back position, a staple throughout Drew Brees' history. That gave Alvin Kamara 19.6 opportunities per game. But again, these are a little more valuable because of Alvin Kamara's usage in the pass game. So if you're in PPR Dynasty Leagues, Kamara, extremely valuable there. Also, 42 red zone attempts. That was 9th in the NFL last year. The main issue with Kamara is going to be what happens now without Drew Brees. Again, Kamara is already 26 years old, still some left in the tank, but how does this offense look? Well, Jameis Winston versus Taysom Hill is going to be a major debate. Hill is going to be significantly worse for the Saints offense, particularly Alvin Kamara. Hill handled 28 red zone attempts last year. Hill doesn't throw to the running back position as much, and New Orleans pass rate dropped 3% when Taysom Hill entered the offense. They actually went from 53% to 48% pass rate, 5% there. Winston, however, shouldn't be that much of a downgrade. If we just look at what Winston did in his final season with Tampa Bay, again, he was the starting quarterback and then backed up the Saints last year. The Saints, while they accounted for 113 receptions last year, Winston's running backs in his final season with the Buccaneers caught 84 balls. And that was a group that had Dare Ogunbowale, Ronald Jones, and Peyton Barber. Alvin Kamara is a major step up there. Not to mention, they lost Jared Cook, they lost Emmanuel Sanders, and they didn't replace them with any viable production. Kamara actually flexes out into the slot on over 10% of his snaps, making him a versatile weapon that the Saints can use in a variety of ways. For that reason, he still checks in as RB5 despite coming in at age 26. Running back 4. We move to New York, and Saquon Barkley, coming off the ACL tear, entering his 4th season, but still just 24 years old. For reference, Barkley, now in his 4th season, is exactly 1 year older than Najee Harris, who was a rookie. So still a lot to like about Barkley from a futuristic perspective. He's 5'11", 233, arguably the most athletic running prospect in the NFL. Last year, he played just 2 games before tearing his ACL. So right now we are looking at 2019 statistics. Rushed for over 1,000 yards on 217 carries, a year where he was also limited by an ankle injury, but he still caught 52 balls for 438 yards. He is one of the marquee 3-down running backs in the NFL. And more importantly, the opportunity has been fantastic for Barkley when healthy. Over 83% of the snaps, over 75% of the carries, over 74% of the targets. These targets did drop a little bit with Eli Manning's retirement. That's why we saw the numbers decline from 2018 to 2019 a little bit. But Barkley's still handling a massive workload, including 74% of the red zone carries. That amounted to 28 in the 2019 season with New York. The tough thing to overcome is going to be New York's offense. Now, they have Joe Judge as head coach. They have Jason Garrett as offensive coordinator. They're not the most efficient forward-thinking offense, but more importantly, this team is only projected for 7 wins. Their offensive line was graded 32nd in the NFL by Pro Football Focus. They have Andrew Thomas, former first-round pick, but the rest of it is below average at best. So there's a lot of rebuilding left to do for this Giants team. It's likely a multi-year rebuild. And what happens with Barkley in that span? When his rookie contract expires, does he move on? Does he stick with the inefficient Giants? Just a few more questions than some of the other running back prospects on this list. But when healthy, Saquon Barkley has an elite workload that rivals really only Christian McCaffrey at the top. So at age 24, Saquon Barkley still checks in as the RB4 in Dynasty, even with a slightly uncertain future. Running back 3, another second-year player. It is Indianapolis Colts runner Jonathan Taylor, 22.4 years old, again in his second year, 5'10", 226 pounds, started 13 games for the Colts last year, played in 15, finished as the 3rd leading rusher in the NFL as a rookie, 1,169 yards, 11 scores on the ground. Also caught 36 balls for 299 yards on 39 targets. Extremely efficient catch rate there. Jonathan Taylor will split with Nyheim Hines. He did play on only 50% of the snaps, 53% of the carries, and 30% of the targets. All those numbers did trend upward towards the end of the year. Again, most of these rookies last year did not have a full offseason because of COVID-19. So seeing them trend this direction, Cam Akers, Clyde Edwards, Jonathan Taylor, it is not surprising. Did handle 47 red zone attempts. That was 6th in the NFL. So this is very clearly his role. And the Colts do undergo some changes. Marlon Mack is back from his season-ending injury, but he signed to just a one-year deal. Nyheim Hines' contract will expire very shortly, giving Jonathan Taylor a path to a full bell cow workload, maybe not this season, but in the near future. They also have Frank Reich still as head coach. He calls their plays. The continuity there is good, and they move from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz. This may be a wash. Phillip Rivers did target the running back position at one of the highest rates in the NFL. But the Colts are very much looking to rebuild Carson Wentz's career here. They also have an excellent offensive line, arguably the best in the entire NFL. They do lose Costanzo to retirement, but they replace him with Eric Fisher. They return Braden Smith, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Mark Lewinsky. This allowed Taylor to run for the third most yards in the NFL, despite playing in a timeshare with Nyheim Hines last year. Again, just 22 years old, a strong offensive line in place, a good coaching staff with efficient play calling. There's a lot to like about Taylor from a size, speed, and age perspective, which is why he checks in as RB3. No qualms if you want to put him at RB2. My dynasty running back 2 is Dalvin Cook, 25.8 years old, 5'10", 210 pounds, started 14 games last year for the Vikings, finished with 1,557 rushing yards, another 361 as a receiver on 44 receptions. Another one of the premier bell cow running backs in the NFL, just plays on a team that embraces more run-heavy concepts maybe than some other teams. They were 27th in overall pass rate, which isn't necessarily bad for Dalvin Cook because of his effectiveness in the run game. Cook did play on 69% of the snaps, 79% of the running back carries, 67.5% of the targets. That equated to 26.1 opportunities per game for Cook. Also, 58 red zone attempts, just behind Derrick Henry, third most in the NFL last year. 13% target share with his team, was 10th overall. The Vikings, they retain their coaching staff. They still have Clint Kubiak as OC. They lose Mike Boone in the running game, but they're still going to function mainly with Alexander Madison as the change of pace. And more importantly, they continue to upgrade their offensive line. They invest in Mason Cole in free agency. They draft Wyatt Davis and Christian Darrisaw to a group that's already invested in players like Garrett Bradbury and Ezra Cleveland in recent years. This is a team in an NFC North division, which is fairly weak and could get easier depending on the status of Aaron Rodgers. It does not appear he will be in Green Bay long term. What we do know is Dalvin Cook should be in Minnesota long term, a team very much invested in the run game overall in one of the weaker divisions in football. While a lot can change for a runner that's already going to be 26 at the start of the year, we just don't have a lot of runners in the NFL with this level of workload, which we can project for a few seasons out. So Dalvin Cook remains the RB2 in Dynasty, narrowly over Jonathan Taylor. And the running back 1, we have Christian McCaffrey, 5th season, still just 25 years old. He is 5'11", 205, but expected to play at a heavier weight after some off-season dietary and training changes. He played just 3 games last year, dealt with a number of nagging injuries, and we'll use his 2019 statistics to talk about his overall workload that we can expect. So in that season, Christian McCaffrey carried 287 times for 1,387 yards. More importantly, he caught 116 balls for 1,005 yards, and that was on 142 targets. The premier pass-catching running back in the NFL. This was good for the second best fantasy season overall by a rusher. As far as opportunity, played on over 93% of the snaps, 93% of the running back carries, and 94% of the running back targets. He handled 26.8 opportunities per game, with much of that skewed in the pass game, elevating his status even further in PPR leagues. Handled 54 red zone attempts, which was second in that 2019 season, and his 23.7 overall target share within the offense was first. This Carolina team is going to move forward with Joe Brady as offensive coordinator again. This will be McCaffrey's first full season as long as he doesn't get hurt with Joe Brady. And Brady allowed Mike Davis to catch 59 balls last year, going back to LSU where he coordinated the offense in 2019. Clyde Edwards-Helaire caught 55 balls. So a very friendly running back offense as far as pass catching goes. This team will undergo some changes. It's a rebuilding process still for Carolina. They go from Teddy Bridgewater to Sam Darnold. Brady was able to coax the best career year that Teddy Bridgewater has ever put up. Hopefully he can do the same from Darnold, the former top 5 overall pick. They also lose Curtis Samuel, but they bring in Terrace Marshall in the second round. Their offensive line undergoes some changes, but they still have Taylor Moton, Matt Paradis. They add Pat Elflein, and they draft Brady Christensen on day 2. So hopefully they can take a step forward. But more importantly, despite losing Mike Davis, they only invested a day 3 pick in the running back position in Chuba Hubbard. That indicates to me that Christian McCaffrey is going to be the workhorse back moving forward, probably playing upwards of 90% of the snaps, handling 90% of the opportunities, which has been a staple of Christian McCaffrey throughout his career. For that reason, he remains the running back 1 despite being 25 years old. This opportunity is just simply unprecedented at the running back position. Even in dynasty leagues, he is worth the number 1 overall pick in your startups. Christian McCaffrey is the number 1 overall back we have for dynasty. Recapping the rankings, here is the list, descending 12 all the way down to 1, starting with Najee Harris, working our way to Christian McCaffrey at number 1. But that will do it for us at Awesemo.com. Again, I am Matt Gajewski. I am on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button on the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We'll be doing mock drafts, best ball drafts, individual player breakdowns, more dynasty rankings, sleepers, everything you can imagine for fantasy football, and you don't want to miss it. So make sure to stick around. We will catch you next time.